on the eastern side of the county galvanised about this, because we were being ignored all the time. In fact, we were ignored right up until the very end, just on this, Claire, because we only got it because of Newlands Cross, because they had to make a bigger gig for the developers. But we got it in the end, but it was a headache, didn't it?
Yeah, but it was a very good example of campaigning in a positive way done by yourselves here in the station that, you know, has resulted in the saving of many lives, I've no doubt about it. And I remember at the time when I was a TD and I was in Fianna Fáil at the time, it was quite frustrating from my point of view not to have been able to make progress on it in my time there, but I'm certainly delighted that people since have made great progress on it.
The first time I drove on that road, because, like, bear in mind, like, we'd obviously been talking about it quite a bit, and Declan was very familiar, but I hadn't driven on it until I drove to the first general election I covered in Arklow. So, and like at the time, like, obviously now it's changed, but at the time I said to Declan when I got there, it's quite scary because there's so many warnings and so many, and I knew straight away, like, that it must have been the one that we were campaigning for. Not that I didn't care about it, but when you're actually on it was very scary. And you weren't running in that first general election I covered, the one that was County Arklow, was it? It was one where the water didn't work.
Yeah, that was 2007. Was it?
No, 2002.
No, I only started 2003, so it's 2007.
Was it? Yeah.
You're thinking of the one for this. You're thinking of the one that had the week-long count.
Oh, right.
No,
that was Nicky Kelly. And
that was just before I started in 2003. So it was 2007. I remember actually that you were running in that, Joe, and that was my first election, and we worked till I think Breda Allen said she'd go through the night, and then it got to about 3:30 or 4, maybe a little later, and she said, actually, it's not going to work. We were like, what? Like, we're all in now. So we all headed home. We were back again the next morning at 9 a.m, and I stayed in Garrett's beautiful house in British Bay. But it was still, the elections we've covered here are one, like, well,
let me just bring in Pat, just on a totally different tack here.
Before Pat was a councillor and he was involved with us, you said nearly the 13 years. I always dealt with Pat even from the hotel point of view, because he used to come on from a hospitality point of view, didn't you?
Yeah.
So he's been on with us for the full 30
very
years,
good.
just in different
Pat, we're back to the cancer recognition for Claire, and you sponsored People of the Year in your Glendalough Hotel.
Yeah. And he sponsored the actual award I won as well. It wasn't just that he held it.
Given the honour of presenting Claire with her award for the People of the Year for her work with the coffee mornings, and we must all acknowledge that. But one thing about Claire, I suppose, that from a Wicklow point of view, and what everything Joe has said is correct, but when we go off mic here and we're talking to her outside, and the fact that she's not from Dublin or not from Wicklow, her passion for Wicklow is incredible, and her frustration is why things don't work in Wicklow and why we're not as successful.
He's thinking of a conversation I had with Noel Keys not too long ago.
You know, and we must recognise, you know, everything that you've done with the station here, and indeed, as Joe said, you know, from a personal point of view, I've never had a run-in with you.
No.
Hopefully I never will.
No.
You know, in the future, and hopefully we will keep in touch.
But we'll see.
You know, it's been an incredible 13 years, and I think
you're getting more crotchety, Pat. You see, that's
no, actually, and I couldn't have chosen like favourite guest to have on today, because there's so many wonderful people that I work with. But I'd have to say that you two came to mind fairly quickly, because I've always had a really good working relationship with both of them, and I would consider them both friends. They've never said no, probably ever. I've had a fair few nights in Pat's hotel over the years, between Christmas parties with the East Coast and all that sort of thing. But Joe being only around the corner, we probably saw each other more as well, because he's so near. And actually, with Pat being as far away, we saw quite a bit of each other as well. So that's why, because we didn't ever have any run-ins. It's very silly to bring people I had fights with in this morning.
You were seen in Avoca yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, well, we were all here in Avoca. Who saw me in Avoca? Cheney wouldn't get much past anyone here.
He has the spies out.
We had a lovely big lunch with loads of people from work in the Fern House, which is always ticking away there. There was no recession in Avoca, I can tell you. So, yeah. Pat and Joe have never found out with me. And Joe, just on from radio contributions of the value of radio stations, what should we be doing in the future? What should, local radio, there's all these challenges coming up with TV, obviously with Netflix and all that sort of stuff, and even with radio. What should people like Claire, now who's a driving force as a producer, what should she be thinking of? What should I be thinking of? What should the radio station be thinking of?
Well, I would say, the model you have here in the morning show particularly, but generally in East Coast is a model that you should continue with. I wouldn't like to see any major changes with it. I think the most important thing is that you give people an opportunity to voice their concerns when they have it. Members of the public, when there are things happening, like if there's a very bad snow, as there was, if the water is off,
that was great crack.
I mean, you kept the county moving then, like that's just one example.
That's when I parked at the cemetery, I can tell you, to walk over in the Oaks.
And that's the beauty of local radio, that it speaks and listens to the local people. And, I suppose Newstalk is slightly different. It has a national format and a national listenership, but I still think it's valid to be listening to the views of the people who are out there, who you're there to serve at the end of the day.
Well, there's memories, Claire, of all this. I mean, the fire was dreadful in Bray.
Yeah.
Yes.
We stood out there at the end of that. I remember the strongest memory is not sending Lauren there, and even... Like, I obviously remember all of it, but it's actually when the funeral walked past us, because we all came out.
Because we're opposite, just in case you don't know, we're opposite actually Springfield Cemetery.
Yeah, we would have been on air at the time of the funeral, so we couldn't be at the funeral, but we all went out to the gate there, and that will probably stay with me forever. I mean, that was pretty appalling. And the fight for a full-time fire service stayed with me for quite some time. I know Dick Roach said he'd bring one in, and he didn't, and I know all the statistics always said, the incidents and the stats they look at didn't match, but what I would have always said, and I'm not an expert, but with such a high industry and high density population, somewhere like Bray, it only takes one incident that's pretty massive, so that stats wouldn't match then. So that was a shame that we didn't get that in, I would say. But another fond memory is when Dick Roach took down a robber in Druids Glen one morning. He managed to get a group of people to safety, which in all fairness to him, he did actually react very well. He used to go swimming every morning before he'd come in, and he did actually, was quite heroic. But as you can imagine, the storytelling, as Dick Roach telling it as himself, as the sort of Batman character, and it was one that I probably will struggle to forget. And the snow was, we actually had an awful lot of cracking snow. Firstly, they let me go home early every day, because it took me 4 hours to get back to Blanchardstown, and I was living on my nerves with that, because remember, it would freeze over halfway through the day. But also, Wicklow is such a stunning place, and it is my favourite place in Ireland, actually, and I'm such a fan. And like Glendalough and Enniskerry and Periscope, when you're up in those places and you're remembering, if you're snowed in there was no, like Avoca and everything, I think people couldn't get out.
We were talking to a particular family who were in Arklow, and they were just outside Arklow, and they hadn't seen anybody in a week, and they had no food, and they was just trying to get food in, and we were on with them on the line every day. How are you getting on today? Oh, nothing today.
There was the November one, which was really shocking, and then there was another one after Christmas, and then the following year I think was I remember Eugene Finnegan slagging me, because I used to say to him, I'd come in with the hot water bottle in the car every day, I'm so cold. He said, why don't you turn the heating on? I was afraid to fall asleep. But Eugene Finnegan was great, all those people who are no longer in the council as well, for those things. I think Bray probably got off lightly compared to somewhere like Glendalough in the snow and the ice. But
and I suppose one thing of the incident with the snow that time was communities came together who actually didn't
the civil
communicate.
Were remarkable.
And communities who didn't communicate with one another all of a sudden were out talking to one another, engaging with one another, and there was a great community spirit. And you're right there about the civil defence. They played a huge
and all
role
the
there.
schools networked in with us to let everyone know. We had a kind of a schools snow page or something so that people could check every day. And the kids were only hoping it would keep going.
We would have availed of that now in school in terms of getting word out to parents whether the school was going to be open or closed on that particular day. The other point I think Declan should be mentioned for those who can remember way back was the origins of East Coast Radio. There was Bray Local Broadcasting, BLB, and there was the one in Wicklow. I think it was East Coast Easy, wasn't it?
Easy, yeah.
And then it was Horizon Radio, and then it morphed into East Coast FM, which we have today, But the very beginning...
I was never in the building down at the Prince of Wales Terrace. You guys probably both remember that studio.
Well, I was. But I can remember being at public meetings when Horizon Radio was being set up originally. Because that was the first time it was actually legal to have a local radio. If you remember, there were pirates before that. And, that really came, it was a bottom-up approach. It was local people who wanted to have their own voice and have their own way of listening and speaking to each other. And I think you've carried it on admirably since.
Well, could I just say that it is more... a programme that takes on the nationals now than it was 13 years ago, and in most part it's Claire who's made sure of that.
It's not true. You'd like it. Obviously, Declan is driving force.
No need for modesty.
I think we do have a challenge, and we also have and Declan is more expert in this than I am, but we have a I think it's a pro that we're so near Dublin, because I've managed with my persistency to convince a lot of people out to us, because we're like, we're only 20 minutes from RT, we're only 12 minutes from TV3. And then they go, and I'll do the phone, we go, you're grand, thanks, we don't want you. And then they go, oh, we'll come out, which is great. But then with that being said, there's a lot of people in Bray and Greystones who have either migrated in from Dublin or feel they're Dublin, and we're competing with all those other radio stations that in the like a Tip FM, you just have like it's so the listenership and the level of people living there is huge. So that's been both a challenge, I think, and an advantage. Our location, but we have changed the show. When I started first, it was a very different show. Billy Timmins featured as much on it then as he did in the end, to be honest with you. But it was a different show when I started, and then it was 3 hours, and then it was 2.5 hours, and then it was 2 hours. But Declan's been a massive supporter the whole way through. Billy was another one who was a great friend, actually.
Okay, we've got to clear a question.
Yeah,
if I can.
We're going to wrap up soon. Go on.
You know, how are you looking forward to working with George Hook? Yeah.
That's an embarrassing question. You can't expect you to answer that.
I'm looking forward to working with him because he's an iconic broadcaster, and I've worked with other iconic broadcasters like Vincent, so I think I'm probably well prepared, but I don't think I'll ever work with anyone like Declan again.
There, well said, Claire.
Yeah.
That's exactly the answer Declan was hoping for.
Last word never work with anyone.
Last word from you, Pat?
No, listen, I wish Claire the very best of luck. I think she's well prepared for George anyway. I think she's done an exceptionally good job here in the East Coast, and indeed for you, and I think she'll be a huge personal loss to you, I think, Declan, after 13 years, you know, and I mean, we wish her the very best of luck, and hopefully we will keep in touch.
Yeah, no, we will. And I just should take this chance to say thank you to the both of those for accommodating and making my job easier. And indeed, I can't name them all, but John Brady in particular has been pretty stunning. Like Simon and Billy and Dick Roach, David Grant, Mick Lynn, like George Jones, Kathleen Keller, all of them over the years, Donal O'Sullivan, like Peter Dempsey, Pat Fitzgerald, all of them have made me laugh. I've had some serious laughs with these guys over the years, and they've all been very accommodating, and they've pretty much always said yes. And when they say no, they've always had a good reason. And even if we had the odd spat, we've always got over very quickly. So I'm very grateful that and it is the local element that I'll lose when I move. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, and thank you to Pat Casey and indeed to Joe Behan for dropping in this morning. Thank you very much. Okay, the morning show at East Coast 087 77 11 103. Hi Declan, we're wishing Claire all the very best. Thanks for supporting my books. Pete also says good luck, says Mick Lynch and all of Beatles Ireland. So there you go, all that crew. And Councillor Miriam Murphy would like to wish Claire every success as well, and glad that you helped me air disability issues as well.
And long may the morning show continue to do that. It's just me going. The show, as Joe said, will still carry on. It's fantastically excellent as it has.
Okay, thank you.
Attention, homeowner!